It's easy to get lost in the throes of madness and depravity when faced with the horrifying truth of the cosmic powers of fear and hunger. That very mania is seemingly what fell upon the titular dungeon, with most of its inhabitants becoming slaves or corpses during the place's collapse, and the ones who somehow survived and escaped being broken, tormented by the horrors of the dark till their dying days. Then there are the inhabitants who have witnessed the overwhelming horror and have spat in its face, the people who are not only able to keep their head above the flood of insanity, but are actively looking to build their own castle upon its foundations. Two such characters in the story are Legard and Nas'hrah. You've seen the outside world, right? That's where you came from, after all. Did you forget already? The world of humans is in chaos. They are waiting for their savior. Someone to lift them from the misery and the agony. Someone to stop the endless wars. Someone to cleanse them from their diseases. Someone to destroy the old world order and the older gods that were the cause of the dark times. Legard is arguably the main character of the Fear and Hunger series. His ambitions and actions are the inciting incident for the first game and the second. Legard started out life as a nobody. No wealth, no name, no future. Until he founded the Midnight Suns, and discovered the prophecy, which said that a man who rivaled the gods in both beauty and power would rise up to overthrow them, and usher in a new golden age. Everyone who heard the prophecy seemed to think that he matched it well enough, but Legard himself harbored doubts. Despite this, Legard would still aim to challenge the gods and gain their powers for himself, which he would use to unite humanity. One kingdom, one crown. Legard is heavily inspired by Griffith from Berserk. Both are beautiful twinks and capable warriors who lead mercenaries and aim to get their own kingdom. Griffith's dream is a childish one though, self-centered. He doesn't even have any kind of reforms in mind for once he gets his kingdom. To him it's a glittering castle in the sky, outside of a vague allusion to the divine right of kings. He doesn't really have any kind of overriding political philosophy that makes him want the power of kingship. It's a very aesthetic-driven goal, and it's here where Legard diverges from Griffith. In Legard we find a man crushed by the weight of what he sees as his responsibility to the world. They believe you're the one from the prophecies. Those ancient texts are but child's wordplay. Of course, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't use them to my advantage. But really, many things are scarily accurate in the prophecy. It talks about the fair-haired man and the one who rivals gods in both power and beauty. Ha, I thought all the older gods were ugly as hell. Don't tell me you buy that stuff too. Nilvan of the new gods is supposedly beautiful, just as the tormented one used to be. The texts also speak, he who unites the warring states, not by the power of the golden staff, but by the power of a dozen pitchforks. Well, all the kings hate me at this point, so that one line I can agree with. I will strive to unify these lands, be it in the prophecies or not, no matter the cost. But I feel like I'm really close to achieving my goals. But the last step is not clear. It's still shrouded in the mist. I'm not certain if this is the path to achieve all this. What do you mean? You are just a step away from founding your own kingdom and becoming one of the most fabled rulers of our time. You'd make a great ruler, I'm sure of it. The common people love you already. I'm sure of it, she says. What difference would it make anyway? History has proven time and time again that order, virtue, and tranquility don't last. I need something definite, something pure. I need to ascend above the kings and queens of our time. The last step isn't shrouded in the mist. It's waiting in the depths of the darkness. How does Legard plan to achieve this goal, you might be wondering? Legard's ultimate ambition is to gather the four souls of the Fellowship and somehow combine them so that he can be born as the strongest new god to ever ascend. In the game there exist soul stones, which, as you might be able to guess, allow you to absorb the souls of the slain. But if you try and do this to the god, well, he has no soul. What this could mean is presently unknown. Souls in Fear and Hunger are determined by what period of the year one is born in, similar to zodiac signs. Does this mean that the god came to be born in an unconventional way, or that he's a product of a more divine origin? It's impossible to say, but for whatever reason he is uniquely suited for this purpose, and it's his destiny to bring order to the world. Which brings us to the opposite side of his coin. Nas'hrah, the bringer of chaos, lord of the Yellow Mages, scourge of the modern man. Nas'hrah has earned himself a plethora of nicknames throughout his reign as a new god. The intrepid wizard finds himself in the dungeon trying to build a body after he was defeated and beheaded at the hands of the Fellowship. While Nas'hrah is a new god, he seems to harbour a deep resentment for his colleagues, and the feeling is apparently mutual.
You have one more question left. Ask anything you want to. What subject do you want to know more about?
Nas'hrah.
Nas'hrah, the previous new god, who held the libraries as his own after the Great Battle. How battle fell for the pathetic tricks Nas'hrah pulled against him is a complete mystery to us. Nas'hrah was not content with what we have here. That miserable worm, the old fool. His mind was weak, his body was weak, and most of all, he couldn't hold his own against the pressure this place has on people. Without reason, he used to sodomize everyone who stood in his way. That is how he desired to spend his days, instead of the true godhood we have here.
Enough. That's more than enough, you filthy maggots. That is how I gave up my pathetic golden crown of the new gods. Are you kidding me? Maggots, swimming in their own vomit. Nas'hrah spits on the ground aggressively.
You are still alive, somewhat. Nas'hrah the half-man.
Nas'hrah the half-man? From the east? Better half than crisp. So, this is what a burnt god smells like. Disgusting. Everything about your miserable existence reeks rotten. Nas'hrah spits on the crisp body of the new god. Well, that went about as well as you could probably expect. He's completely self-centered, and his moral framing is might makes right, taken to its most logical conclusion. Well, as logical as a talking magical head could be. Nas'hrah in many ways is a dark twist on Mimir, Odin's chief counsel in Norse mythology. Like Mimir, Nas'hrah has access to knowledge that the player does not, and has a greater understanding of the larger mysteries of the universe. Though, like the god, he is blinded by his own arrogance. Nas'hrah in the World of Fear and Hunger is responsible for writing the Human Dilemma, though it gets attributed to his rival and predecessor, Betel, a statue of the mythological figure known as Betel the Enlightened One, the famed new god who formed the grand libraries in the City of the Gods, where every one of his successors would gather their knowledge and fill the library shelves with books from all forms of expertise. Generally viewed as the father of enlightenment among the new gods, and the one who wrote about the human dilemma, it is widely believed that the mythical figure is based on Bethel Kishar, one of the more popular scholars of ancient Mesopotamia. You hear voices echoing from the beheaded wizard. What? Say what? He is the one who wrote it? This tendril muncher was too deep in his own deliriums to have enough self-awareness to come up with something ingenious like the human dilemma. Nas'hrah, the terror of the modern man. That is the author of the human dilemma. What is the human dilemma? What is... You call yourself a yellow mage? Well, I'll tell you. How could a mere human ever ascend to true godhood? An older god represents purity, pure ideologies, and untainted concepts. Humans are incapable of that. Everyone has their own truth, their own version of purity, just feeble opinions. Opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. If you're worshipping one, following an arsehole, all you smell is shit. Yet, there are ones like Ulmer, or even more recently that girl, what's her name, from a few hundred years back. That is the dilemma. How can there be examples of purity, regardless of your human limitations? That is the human dilemma. Despite how crude he can be in both language and appearance, in truth he's a learned scholar, and was the enlightened one before Voltiel, and now he languishes in the dungeon, until the untimely arrival of the player. In Fear and Hunger, you can encounter both of them in the dungeon and recruit them into your party. Lagarde we've covered in Finding Lagarde, shameless plug. All you have to do to recruit him is get to Lagarde before 30 minutes of starting your game, and then he can join you. Otherwise he'll have spilt jam on himself and be far too embarrassed to join our party. Recruiting Nas'hrah is a little more challenging. To recruit the Crawling Chaos, you have to first acquire a yellow amulet by talking to one of his yellow mages, and have the Cube of the Depths. Also, that's likely why the Yellow Mages are found in the mines in the Dweller Village respectively, to find and acquire the cube for their master. We confront Nas'hrah and have this interaction. You seem to possess an Eclipse Talisman. That means you have slain one of my miserable pupils. Don't let it fool you into thinking that you are anything worthwhile in my eyes, because of such a feat. I am the great wizard of the Eastern Sanctuaries, Nas'hrah, the bringer of chaos. I use my pupils like the queen ant uses her workers, just to expand my reign. Your pupil said you could teach me. Well, that miserable worm was wrong. The wizard is summoning something from the darkness. Something is advancing from the darkness. You still waste your time talking to me? Suit yourself. A menacing presence is staring at you from the shadows. I admire your foolish bravery. Tell me, why are you here in the darkness? I feel like there is something greater waiting for me in the depths. Is that so? I noticed that little cube of yours. I wasn't expecting a worm like yourself to be carrying an item of that big importance. I could give you the honor of kneeling before me, if you were interested. I am interested. Too bad I have no body anymore. I would make you perform other tasks as well. I go by many titles, but you can call me Nas'hrah, the doom and terror of the modern man.
Okay.
I hate the idea that I'd have a brainless maggot like you following me as a pupil, but I might just need you this once. You see, I need to destroy the reign of the new gods. I want to rip off their spines and watch them slump down limp and feeble. I want to watch them bleed while they're being squashed by the very same arrogance that helped them rise to the power. But my strength isn't quite the same as it once was. Make no mistake that I could crush you like the worm you are. But to get the job done, I need my body back. There should be a way to do just that in the ancient city that's below these ruins. I want you to aid me there. If you should brave Mahab with the two and defeat the Fellowship, Lagarde will reveal that he lied about his amnesia and used you to get him here, to this point, the only place in creation where ascension is possible, the Golden Throne. But with Nas'hrah in your party, as you might expect, he'll have something to say about this. This throne. This is the moment I've strived for. This is the moment I've suffered for. Lagarde, What do you mean? You said before you couldn't remember. Das, you remember our talk about the path? You might not understand this yet, but this is it. The path. I thought you said you couldn't remember anything. In order to reach greater heights, to unify the land, to bring upon the new era, I need this power. The strength of kings and queens is not enough. I need more. Something that lasts beyond me. Why would you look for power and justice in a place like this? Such pure virtues couldn't exist here. This place taints everything it touches. Do you think any of the grand kingdoms history books speak of stand on pure foundations? They were all built on bloodshed and violence. But what if there was a way that wouldn't require thousands of soldiers on opposing sides, shedding their lives? What if such grand kingdoms only required one soul to succumb to the darkness? Only one soul to be tainted? Can anything so grand be built on rotten foundations? You ridiculous, self-indulging maggot. What are you even going to do with the power of new gods? Are you going to try and push a new world order? An order where the cruelties of the older gods would only be a passage in the history books? You fool. This is not the part of the new gods. New gods, in fact, are just a creation of the rules of the old. They are there to guide mankind, like a cattle to the slaughtering grounds. I'm sick and tired of hearing about the old world order and the new world order. Order this and order that. Mankind is not meant for an order. Our place is in chaos. Humans originate from chaos. It's a 1 in a billion coincidence that we even exist. Why would you try to control our existence and put it under an order? For mankind to truly be free from the reign of the older gods, we must strive for chaos. What's the matter, little bastard baby? Did I just crush your miserable worldview and beliefs? Just shut up. Just shut up. That bastard.
And it's here we understand the main conflict of Fear and Hunger. Chaos versus order. When it comes to the Headless Wizard, it's easy to dismiss him as a mustache-twirling villain, but obviously that's inaccurate. The dude doesn't even have hands. Nas'hrah is talking about mankind in a Locke's Hobbes sense of the word, as if man is a beast and trying to order it is not only an absurd endeavour, but a doomed one. Nas'hrah uses his experience as a new god and a fallen one to make his case, and the god doesn't really have a comeback or a counter-argument besides his own blind conviction, which Nas'hrah manages to at least shake. In this particular instance, the god had come too far to go back now, and he jumps on the throne, ascending to godhood. Both characters are evil men, in that both desire to be supreme dictators and above everyone else. However, the god has a pretense of doing it for humanity as a whole, wanting a united kingdom, a united continent, a one mankind. And it should be said that the god is also a massive hypocrite. To achieve his dream of peace and order, he's pillaged innocent villages, led his own men, the Midnight Suns, into the jaws of doom, and lied to Das, his lieutenant and closest confidant, manipulating her and the other dungeon dwellers into getting him to the throne of Ascension. And what makes the god's idealism even more laughable is that the god's prophecy is a lie. The author of said prophecy seems to be Nilvan, who had use of the god in her own schemes of gods and devils. During the Ascension process, you encounter a version of yourself, a being that will ultimately replace the human you, and inflict your will upon the world. So one could argue that all the Void does is destroy you, and replace you with something else. Nas'hrah refuses to go back to the Void. He's been there before and sees no reason to go again. What we find of Lagard in the Void is odd, and not just because he's naked initially. We talk to him and he reveals that he's been waiting for us for a long time.
How long has it been?
100 years or so. Have you found what you were looking for? I found something. They say Sylvan created us according to her own image. But what if there is a god only an abstract, whom we have made physical according to our own image? That would reverse our roles, essentially. Or is there a god at all? It's something we as humans cannot rely on anymore. I don't know if you can ever understand my motivations, truly. But this is something only I can go through with. I was always meant to go through this. I did try to live my life otherwise. It was all to no avail. To live is the same as to suffer. To survive, we need to find some meaning from all the suffering. The truth behind it all is the contrast. Without suffering, there would be no bliss or paradise. It is my duty to craft that paradise out of the miserable existence of human life. Only I can do it. I mean no harm to you. I am your god, after all. To show how much I love you, I will release you from this darkness, one way or another. If you kneel to me, I will let you out.
From here we can either kneel to the god or fight him. If we kneel, we get this ending.
Kneel to him. Yes. Love your god. You left the dungeons. Contrary to all common sense, you made it out alive. Your return to civilization would go without festivity. You were back to square one, essentially. Your long journey to the black gained you nothing. The only thing you brought with you was the bigger understanding of all the darkness this world hid beneath the human eye. Not a day would pass by that you didn't curse this knowledge. Just the idea drove you towards madness with each passing day. After several years living in seclusion, you started hearing rumors about the return of the Knights of the Midnight Sun and their now legendary captain, the Guard. This man, with a mysterious aura, was unifying the Western world at a rapid rate. It's almost as if the gods themselves were on his side, choosing the right side of the coin at every possible turn. Essentially, and inevitably, he was throned as the Yellow King, and he would bring prosperity to the Western world, the kind that had never been seen before. You were never fully convinced, however. The name Yellow King left you puzzled, and something about his campaigns gave you uncanny feelings. On your older days in the Kingdom of Rondon, you finally caught a glimpse of the Guard after multiple decades had gone by. Since you two departed ways, you finally understood where the name Yellow King came from. The Guard still looked the same age, almost exactly like you remembered. The only difference was his sickly yellow skin, coloured by the dark green hue of the endless void. He was not a human. This was not man taking the reins for themselves from the gods. This was something entirely different.
This is ultimately what I think becomes of the man, but that's another video for another time. The god is doubtlessly a unique individual on the earth, but he's not some prophesized savior from the tales of children, especially considering it's canonically just as likely that the god gets gutted and left in the dungeon to rot. The Yellow King is probably a name most of you have heard of, most likely from Hastur, a creature from the Cthulhu mythos. But he himself gets his names from the story titled The King in Yellow, a collection of short stories about a play, The King in Yellow, and the anonymous entity of the same name. The stories all in some way reference the play throughout, not all of them are straightforward horrors or weird fiction though. The Yellow King is a strange figure, haunting the stories, seemingly purportedly hailing from a place called Carcosa, a lost mysterious land that doesn't follow the laws of physics as we would understand them. The King in Yellow of the game appears to us wearing the warm colours of the sun, but he is in truth a god of decay. His reign is doomed to be limited. The new gods seem to believe the prophecy surrounding the god is true, but the new gods are fools, and are blinded on a number of subjects. The
The Yellow King claims to be a loving and merciful god. It has a childlike smile and talks about basking us in a beautiful love. The game uses a lot of Christian iconography to ground its mythology for the player. Ulmer is a story almost exactly like Christ's, except when Ulmer rose after 3 days, he reaped a bloody vengeance on those who killed him. The god likewise will go on a campaign of murder across the continent of Europa, should he be allowed to leave the void. He's followed by his snake. The snake is the most loathed of creatures in Christendom, maybe only behind the dragon, and it's central to the design of Lugard's new form. It heals its wounds for him, as you fight him. The snake convinced Eve to partake of the fruit from the Tree of Knowledge, dooming mankind for the rest of eternity, and ensuring their exile from the Garden of Eden. In a way, the snake represents knowledge and trickery. Is that what the snake symbolizes here? Does the god bring knowledge to mankind? Is he a Prometheus bringing fire, or a righteous angel delivering justice? Maybe. Because even the devil was an angel once. In the story of Fear and Hunger, canon is loose. Therefore, it's somewhat difficult to pinpoint the exact way things played out in the first game, considering how many branching options and endings that are featured in the game's narrative. One thing we can confirm, though, is that the god and Nas'hrah survive, if you want to use that word, the events of Fear and Hunger, and find themselves back in the mix of the greater scheme in 1942, Prehevil. Lugard, now fully consumed by his Yellow King persona, spends the next 352 years attempting to fulfill his dream of uniting the lands, and fails multiple times, before adapting a new persona and leading Bremen, essentially Germany, as the Kaiser in 1942. Yeah, Termina goes to some fun places. Lugard is now a brutal military dictator. The Bremen are a fierce military force, and threaten to roll over the world with their great war machine. Though strangely, as soon as Lugard took over the capital of Bohemia, Prehevil, the Bremen Empire engaged in peace talks with the other nations of the world, ultimately resulting in a tense peace. But truthfully, peace is far from the Yellow King's agenda. In the city of Prehevil, in a bunker buried deep beneath the earth, lies the potential to create a god, and the god means to use it. In the events of Termina, Lugard has initiated the Logic Project, attempting to make a new ascended god, like Nilvan did before him. He also seeks to create an artificial world, his own Carcosa, if you will. Nas'hrah, meanwhile, has been less than involved in history since the events of Fear and Hunger. Osar, one of the 8 characters you can play as, is a Yellow Mage, a disciple of Nas'hrah, and one of the last in the world. He has a backstory that involves him going to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger in 1942 and retrieving the head of Nas'hrah, which is now scarred, burned beyond recognition. He can communicate via telepathy, and seems capable of some level of omniscience, knowing about recent goings-on in the world, despite spending the past 3 centuries in a dead god's basement. But barring that, he's completely powerless, unable to move on his own or set things on fire. What happened to Nas'hrah to find himself in this predicament? You take a look into the black. Yes! Grogaroth! You nasty, vile piss stain. This is the day. This is the day. The Yellow Mages worship Grogaroth, albeit for the sake of their own power, rather than any kind of genuine appreciation or affection for the god. So when Nas'hrah confronted Grogaroth, well, they draw their power from the being. And Nas'hrah might be the most powerful Yellow Mage, but he does the exact same thing. Imagine if you drew a stick figure on a piece of paper and it challenged you to a fight. Well, you just ripped the paper in half, right? We talked to Nas'hrah upon finding him. And there it was. The source of the voice. A burnt and withered head. A severed head, to be more precise. The head had deep lines running across it. In the place of its eyes were dark and empty sockets. The only hair on the head was the sparse mustache under its big nose. I wasn't expecting a worm like you weaseling its way this deep to the dungeons. But I'll take what I get. All earthworms do after all is dig. Your garments. Maybe you do have more than a camel's spunk in place of your brains. You're a yellow mage, are you not? You confirmed the suspicions of this beheaded oddity. Figures, that is why a measly maggot like yourself could hear my call. Very well, kneel before me, for I am your master, Nas'hrah, the doom and terror of modern man. That name, Nas'hrah, that was a name you were not expecting to hear. It was a name even the Yellow Mages only talked in the darkest hours of the night. Nas'hrah, the harbinger of the burning crusade. Nas'hrah, the bringer of torment. Nas'hrah, the doom and terror of modern man. The great wizard from the eastern sanctuaries went by many names. He indeed was your master, for this beheaded wizard was the one who gave birth to the Yellow Mages, and their ideology. Only that had happened over 1,000 years earlier. There had been no records of Nas'hrah for at least 500 years. You are a lucky bastard. Lucky indeed. There is a man I want skinned alive. After that, I want to rip off their spines. Those maggots. They will slump before me, limp and feeble. Your master seemed to be surprisingly up to date with the twists and turns the world had taken since his absence. He had a mission for you. As a yellow mage, you were supposed to follow your own ambition and greed. But there was a lot you could learn from this death-defying wizard that could further your knowledge on dark matters greatly. You decided to play along. You were sure that this terror of the modern man was perfectly aware of your reasoning too. That was the typical relationship between a master yellow mage and their apprentice after all.
Throughout the game, Nas'hrah will communicate with Osar and comment on events and characters, and it's not just all in the name of exposition as you might expect. If you confront Legard as Osar, then Nas'hrah, who's been communicating with you through telepathy the entire game and nobody else, will talk to Legard instead.
You hear voices echoing from the beheaded wizard. He is the reason we are here, my pupil. Imagine that. All this effort for this little chicken shit with delusions of grandeur. You were late, you know. Let him know. Nas'hrah, the terror of the modern man, is here to extract his revenge. Call him a bastard baby. Do it! Do it! If you've come to witness the birth of the new era, do it! The only time this spineless shit will be able to stand up straight is when I ravage him from behind. The birth of a new god. Call him a bastard baby! Do it! Do it! Call him a maggot scum! We need to rip this yellow piece of shit to shreds. The logic, the machine god, is online. That head you're carrying, is that what remains of Nas'hrah? About goddamn time. What a surprising reunion. A fitting one, nonetheless. You self-indulging maggot, I'll show you what fits and where. Foul-mouthed as always. No need to be. If anything, you should be happy to hear that I ended up taking your advice. As you might remember, I did think at the time that I would be like the one true god, worshipped in the coming age. My ego was problematic, to say the least. But alas, the world is much too capricious and chaotic. Just like you said it was. It was never to be fully controlled. It will never reach true harmony and order. But chaos itself is not something to be dreaded. Chaos is but a transitional phase. Where it leads determines whether the chaos is a negative force or not. I embraced the chaos and saw where it led me. The endless cycles of mankind's struggle for power had to lead somewhere. I twisted the cycles into a spiral. Each cycle pushed on further and further, from the grasp of the old world, closer to our true potential. We're now at the climax of that spiral as we speak. We cannot control the world laid down by primal forces, but we can build a new one. The singularity. Our promised land awaits. I have to hand it to you. It's a pretty clever ploy. You found a way, and created a universal concept shared by all of mankind. If I didn't test every fiber of your being, I might even want to wait and see where it all leads. But I can't have a rectal extension like yourself leading us to jack shit. I wasn't expecting any less from you. So, come at me then. The breath of the machine god is still frail. In her current fragile state, I cannot let you near her anyway. Kaiser lifts his sword and prepares himself. So, Legard and the new god's plan in a nutshell is to create an artificial void for mankind's sole purpose. We don't exactly know what this means, or whether it will result in some kind of shared hive mind for humanity. At this point you have to fight Legard. Nas'hrah, despite thinking Legard's plan of uniting the human consciousness might work, hates Legard enough to want to sabotage it anyway. Legard's tiredness in this scene is interesting. The last time these two spoke, Legard was frustrated to the point of nearly being in tears. The Legard we meet in 1942 has been alive for centuries, and is almost content at this point to be a mere witness to the ascension of logic, without being part of it himself. Logic is humanity's attempt to create a god, and develop their own version of the void, which would essentially make the old gods redundant. Humanity would have full control of the natural world, to some extent. So in a sense, Legard is a Satanist character, looking to guide humanity away from the machinations of the old order, and into a new age, away from divine power, and into human power. Nas'hrah's plan is far more parasitic, looking to take the power of the old gods and use it for himself, and in hundreds of years that plan hasn't really changed. If anything, he's gotten more parasitic, now relying on Osar to carry out his every petty vendetta, and he doesn't really fully disagree with Legard's logic plan, but he still wants to destroy it anyway, because he just hates Legard and the new gods that much. And for the record, yeah, he's kinda right, the new gods are assholes. Ultimately, I think both men are incorrect. Even if their moral philosophies have some points, their means of achieving them are monstrous and evil, and that very evil has left its mark on them both. Both men, if they can still be called that by Termina, are shadows of what they wish to be in the first Fear and Hunger game. Legard finds himself as leader of an entire nation, and the de facto leader of the new gods, the only one able to influence the human world in any meaningful way anymore. Though he's lost his light, his power wasn't enough to unite the world, and the Bremen are looked at as warmongers and feared all throughout the world. Half of his soldiers are marriages, or worse, fleshy abominations that are loyal to the guard without question, but other troops like Pav, a lieutenant in Legard's army, hate him to the point where he tries to stage an assassination. When he was a simple man from Rondon, a mercenary, he wanted to do good, and when he ascended, he claimed to be an all-loving god. But in the world of Fear and Hunger, love is just not enough. His last hope for uniting humanity is the Logic Project, and even then, older forces are at play and threaten to piss in the face of his ambitions all over again. Nas'hrah, meanwhile, is completely impotent. A head with no ability to move on its own or affect his will, he is alienated from the new gods, being humiliated by Grogroth, and now has to rely on Osar to achieve his own personal dream, which at this point just seems to be getting a rise out of the guard, and spoiling his plans out of spite. There's a reason they've both lost so much, and continue to lose in Termina. Their perspectives are based more on ego than altruism. They're so concerned with what's best for humanity, they've lost all connection to it. They're closer to the old gods than they are to the playable characters of Termina. The idea of humanity's obsession with controlling their own destiny, and even the idea of destiny itself, comes up a lot in Fear and Hunger. Now I would argue the very concept of destiny in a literal sense is a lie. The great powers of the universe of the old gods. Humanity's ascension wasn't part of the old god's plan. In fact, only one old god even seems to still be active in the world today. The trickster Moon Rare. The only ascended god the old gods ever seemed to actually want was Ormur, and after him they created the new god trap. where greedy humans would constantly reset the timeline back to 809 in search for their own personal ascension. Over the centuries, their power diminishes, and they become weak enough to once again be overthrown. It's only when characters go off the beaten path that they seem to actually achieve anything, even in small ways, like showing brief kindness to a little girl, but that's something to discuss in the next video. As for Nas'hrah and the Guard, who knows what fate awaits them? Chances are the activation of Project Logic is the canon ending of Termina, and if I had to guess, the two would have their second clash of words in the White Bunker, so what will become of them in Fear and Hunger 3? I honestly couldn't guess. Neither of them seem to be inclined to sit in the Hall of the New Gods, so they'll no doubt be participating in the greater scheme, pulling strings, trying to ensure humanity's survival in their own way, though I do think they'll meet again, one last time, and that it will finally be closure for one, if not both of them.